Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back in new fanfic. What if Kakashi met Orochimaru's most dangerous subordinate? Part 1. 4 years after the Nine Tails attack, 15 years of age. Naomi sat on the curb counting out the wad of money in her hand. Damn it, she muttered, counting it a second time. Those guys never give me enough. She shook her head and shoved the money in a hidden pocket of her sleeve. She sat silently, watching the few people who inhabited the slum area, and thinking of the last weapons deal she made. She had never exactly been smart with numbers, nor did she know how to read very well, but she knew she had been chipped out on quite a bit of money for the weapons she stole. Although, it was to her benefit that she didn't argue any further. Naomi considered all of the food options she had available to her with the amount of money she now had, which honestly wasn't much, but it was something to fill her growling stomach. What she really wanted was a cup of coffee, black, hot, and delicious. The tempting waft from the nearby coffee stand stung her like a punch to her empty gut. She got out the money in her pocket again, counting it and dividing up the bills for the right amount for the smallest cup possible. The rest of her money would be going to finding her a place to sleep for a few nights and what little food she could afford. As infrequent as these deals were, she tried to make the money stretch as long as possible. After buying her coffee, Naomi returned to her seat on the curb, savoring the dark taste of the scalding liquid. She moved her long, raven black hair over her shoulder, covering her left side from the cold morning breeze. She closed her brown eyes as she enjoyed the coffee's taste and the warmth it was building in her hands. "I don't want to interrupt your morning thoughts," a man's voice said behind her, "but you are looking a little lost. If you're looking for special company," she told him, turning back to her nearly empty coffee cup, "you're looking in the wrong place." He shook his head and went to stand in front of her. "No, you misunderstand me," he said, blocking her view of the people she had been watching. He continued to smile wickedly. "I don't want any special company. I'm looking for a certain kitsune. I hear she has near immeasurable skill with secrecy and thievery. I'm looking to hire her." Naomi looked at the strange man for a moment then scoffed, causing his smile to falter. "I don't know where you heard immeasurable skill, but if it's what people say, then I suppose it's true." "Then you are her?" he asked, looking at her questioningly. "Do you need proof?" she countered, setting her empty cup on the curb beside her. He smiled again, sending chills down Naomi's spine. "I have no need of that." She eyed him suspiciously. "What do you want? I could use you for something extremely important." "Come," he waved, turning to walk away. "We can talk it over breakfast." He looked back at her. "You are hungry, aren't you?" As though on cue, Naomi's stomach growled loudly. The offer of free breakfast and a job sounded extremely good to her. She had no idea who this man was, nor did he ask who she was. Though, it seemed to her he knew who and what she was, making her feel unsure about trusting him in any way. Her stomach growled loudly again, prompting her to jump up and follow the man down the road. She had decided to trust him for now. Orochimaru frowned at his newest test subject as she writhed on his experimenting table. "Oh, come now," he said with an annoyed sigh. "It shouldn't hurt that much." Naomi swallowed a cry rising from her throat and clenched her fists tightly, her wrists pulled against the restraints holding her down. Wherever he had made black seals on her skin, it had begun to burn. He had told her the seals were to help her accomplish the mission he had planned out for her. However, she suspected it was more than just enhancements to her abilities. She had hardly been working for Orochimaru for a week when he began to use her as an experiment. She knew he was testing her abilities as a kitsune, and she despised him for it. However, it was too late to go back to her old, unsteady job now that she had worked for him for several months. The only benefits she regarded was a permanent place to stay and any money she received for completing assignments she was allowed to keep, allowing her to buy her own food. To her, this burning pain on her skin, compared to Orochimaru's other experiments, was only a small price to pay for the luxuries she now got to enjoy. Finally, much to Naomi's relief, Orochimaru released the seals from her skin so she relaxed her fists. He turned away from her to write something on a sheet of paper. "I need you to go and get these scrolls for me," he started, turning the paper around to show her what he had written. Find the ones with these symbols on it. Naomi furrowed her brow, studying the symbols and trying to figure out what they meant. She hated it when he made her do something that required reading. He knew she barely could, but she had no choice but to go do what he wanted. The archive library was quiet. Naomi wasn't surprised by the lack of security this hour of the day in Konoha. With such fair weather, most people were at lunch or having an early afternoon nap. However, she didn't find sneaking into this building to be incredibly difficult in the first place. She figured with the information these scrolls must hold the security would be tighter, but the lack of security made her uneasy. Nobody had even spotted her on the roofs. Before jumping down from the open window in the ceiling, she tied her hair into a long braid, pushing it behind her and out of her way. Her feet hardly made a sound when they hit the floor between the overfilled shelves. She reached into the satchel hanging from her shoulder and pulled out the now crumpled paper Orochimaru had given her. Smoothing it against the floor, she stared at the writing, etching it into her memory. She looked around her at the many shelves of scrolls in the large room, sighing heavily with the enormous task she now faced. After what felt like an hour, Naomi finally found the first scroll and shoved it triumphantly into her satchel. Since she had been staring at these symbols for quite some time, she began to recognize a few, making a little sense in their organization. The next few she found were a little easier to find since they were roughly in the same area. She had one final scroll to find when she heard a door nearby creak open and loud voices following. She cursed herself for not sensing anyone earlier. Scrambling to hide behind a shadowed shelf, she prayed she would be able to avoid the two people she heard coming towards her hiding spot. She glanced up at the window she had left open in the ceiling, wondering how she would get through it without them noticing. I'm telling ya never listen to my advice when ya want me to give it, so I don't understand why I continue to bother, the first male said. Yeah, but maybe if you actually said something worthwhile, I would listen, said the other male. They both laughed. Yeah, whatever. Let's just get those couple of scrolls and get back to work. The captain needs them for some research he's doing. The two men had stopped one aisle away from her hiding spot. She glanced up at the open window again, willing herself to take the chance to escape. Hey! Exclaimed the first man. Naomi's heart jumped. These aren't supposed to be missing. Nobody else has access to this place but us. By that point, she knew it was too late to escape undetected. Quickly, she jumped up the shelves, using each shelf like rungs on a ladder to get towards the ceiling window. Hey, you! Stop! Ordered the second man, but he was too late. Naomi almost smiled as she escaped through the window and onto the roof. She heard shouts and raised alarms as she ran over people's roofs towards the outer rim of the village. She almost enjoyed the thrill of the chase, knowing that she wouldn't be caught. But she didn't understand what it was she exactly stole. Obviously these scrolls were important, maybe even dangerous, but if they were so important, why were they so damn easy to take? She had made it outside of the village when she finally sensed people following behind her. She didn't expect any more than 6 to pursue her, but she was surprised to sense closer to 12 individuals. Are these scrolls really that important? She wondered. She knew the terrain outside of the village well, running swiftly on the tree branches. She had grown up running from the law, so this chase was also nothing new to her. She even knew how and where to hide. Naomi sensed only one individual had gotten any closer to her. Whoever they were coming up fast, leaving everyone else behind to catch up. She jumped down to the ground, dodging the trees as she ran. As she jumped to the ground, she heard the faint sound of a kunai cutting through the air and hitting a tree trunk above her. She felt her hair fall out of her braid as she continued to run. Whoever had thrown the small blade was now extremely close and accurate enough to cut the ends of her hair. She had no time to find a place to hide. Stop! A man's voice shouted sharply behind her. She dared not to look back at him. She remembered some close calls for getting caught by the law, but never had they been this close. I order you to stop. Suddenly, the man tackled her to the ground, both of them rolling across the grass after impact. She tried to scramble away, but he was quicker, grabbing her by the ankle and pulling her towards him. She tried kicking at him, but he was still stronger than her. He held her down on her back, holding her wrists above her head while sitting on her middle. She was terrified to see an animal mask staring back at her. Never in her life had she ever been caught. She had always taken the Anbu of Konoha to be untalented police dogs, yet here she was, looking into the feared eyes of a Sharingan user. As quickly as she had recognized the Sharingan, she had noticed he only had the Sharingan in his left eye. In her moment of shock, she slowly became conscious of the position she was in and his eyes staring down at her. As though realizing what he was doing, he shook his head and flipped her over to tie her hands behind her back. He pulled her up to her knees as his comrades appeared around them. "Great work," declared one of the other pursuers. Through the hair that had fallen in front of her face, Nayame could see all of them were wearing similar animal masks. She couldn't tell who it was that had spoken. She felt someone take her satchel from around her shoulder and heard them going through it. "All of the stolen scrolls are here," said another voice. "Excellent. Let's get her back to the village." They forced her to her feet and pushed her forward, prompting her to walk. As they made the silent trek back to Konoha, Nayame wondered what was going to happen now. She feared the Sharingan user that held onto her upper arm, making sure she wasn't going to escape. It wasn't fair of the Anbu to use someone with an eye such as his, she thought bitterly to herself. He had also purposely cut her beautiful black hair a few inches shorter. She had used her favorite, and last, ribbon to tie the braid to. In that moment she felt very ugly. Nayame also feared what Orochimaru would do when he discovered she had been arrested. He had trusted her to this mission and she had failed horribly. The thought made a shiver of terror run across her skin, penetrating deep into her bones. What about the seals he had done on her skin? Wasn't that supposed to help her? What were they for? It was too late for her to find out now that she could see the village gates. No matter what torture she could go through from the village, it certainly was no match for what Orochimaru would do to her when she returned to him. Soon Nayame found herself sitting cuffed to a chair in front of a table. She had been told of interrogation rooms like this with the good cop and the bad cop routine. Whatever that meant, she looked around the mostly empty room, staring across at her reflection in the one-way glass. She tried to sense whether or not someone was watching her through the glass, but felt a pressure surrounding her instead. "Don't bother trying to use any jutsus while you're in here," an older man stated tiredly as he suddenly walked through the door and sat in the chair across the table from her. "Those cuffs on your hands, make sure they won't work." He leaned back in the chair, looking Nayame over. The man with the single Sharingan had followed behind the first man. He stood silently against the wall with his arms crossed, watching her intently through the animal mask. She shifted uncomfortably in her seat, turning her gaze to the table. The man across from her cleared his throat. "My name is Miro," he said, fingering at a folder in his hands. Nayame stayed silent. "From some of the intel we've gathered on you, it says here," he said, opening the folder to the front page, "you've got quite the story. Or legend, I should say. You're a kitsune. Part fox, part woman. Straight out of folklore." He sat up straight. "But that's not our focus today, is it?" Miro smiled, putting wrinkles on his face and revealing a set of crooked teeth. She felt his gaze even though she wasn't looking at him, her eyes fixed onto the tabletop. His smile quickly disappeared. "Why'd you do it? Why did you steal those scrolls?" Nayame kept her mouth shut, shaking with fear. She wasn't afraid of what Miro or the Sharingan user could do to her, she was more terrified of what Orochimaru would do if she said anything. Miro continued to berate her with questions. "Who do you work for? What were the scrolls for? How did you find out about them? How did you manage to get them undetected?" She wished he would just shut up. What excuse could she give to justify her theft? Finally, Miro leaned back in his chair, apparently done with this first barrage of questions. He pulled out a piece of paper from the folder, pushing it in front of her so she could see it. "There, if you want to read your charges from today, go ahead." Nayame glared at the paper and then up at him. "I have no interest in answering any of your questions," she growled, spitting at him. Miro wiped his face, meeting her glare. "You have no idea how much trouble you're in, do you? Do you not realize what you tried to steal? What information you could have leaked to an enemy of our village? His voice rose with each question. I have no leaf headband. I am loyal to no village, much less yours, she declared distastefully. Naomi felt her blood rising, her wrist straining against the metal of the cuffs. The Sharingan user took a defensive stance as the cuffs themselves broke. Miro, leave now, he ordered, raising his mask to reveal his eye. The older man stood from his chair but was thrown against the wall with the table Naomi had flipped over. The younger held her hands away from his face as she jumped at him. He noticed her nails were longer and sharper than they were a few minutes ago, but it was her eyes that surprised him the most. Instead of their normal brown, they had turned red. He was struggling against her strength. This small woman was pushing him across the floor. Where had this sudden strength come from? The man hadn't wanted to use his eye to restrain her, but it seemed as though he had no other choice. A quick look in her eyes with the Sharingan and she immediately went slack, falling into his arms. Ow, Miro said, sitting up from behind the broken table. What the hell just happened? Are you alright, Kakashi? Kakashi nodded, carefully laying Naomi on the floor. I have no idea what that was. She didn't fight that much when we arrested her. He looked over at the other man. Your cheek is bleeding, he commented. Naomi awoke lying on a hard surface. She pushed herself up to a sitting position, holding her thumping head. She looked around and found she had been moved to a cell. The cell was stone with a single sink, toilet, and bed against the walls. Metal bars kept her inside. That was quite the show you just pulled, a man's voice said at the bars. Naomi recognized his voice as the Sharingan user. What was that? He asked. None of your business, she replied sharply, turning towards him. She looked him over. His arms were crossed as he stared at her, expression unfazed by her bitterness. She thought it was silly of him to still be wearing another mask that hid his face while his leaf headband covered the Sharingan eye. His animal mask hung on a clip over his left hip. You just added onto your list of charges. Not only theft, but also assault. Did you not see the extensive list? Naomi glared daggers at him as it slowly dawned on him. Oh, he said with gradual realization. You can't read, can you? Despite herself, she shook her head, avoiding his gaze. No wonder you lashed out. I'm not afraid of you, she spat. He shook his head. I don't think fearing me is necessary. You're afraid of something, or rather, someone else. Who is it? The person who hired you. Naomi kept her mouth shut. She was being interrogated again. Listen, Naomi, if you cooperate, whatever sentence you get will be waived some. It's better for you to talk than to not. She smiled, laughing quietly to herself. No, she said, shaking her head. No, it isn't. Then why don't you tell me what those scrolls were for? Let's start there, he prompted. She continued to shake her head. I can't read. How am I supposed to know what those scrolls were for? You should congratulate me though, she stated, causing him to crease his brow in confusion. An illiterate kitsune managed to steal literature that was supposed to be heavily guarded. Yet which one of us is inside a jail cell? He sighed heavily as she glared at him again. Here, he said, opening a slot in the bars and reaching out of Naomi's sight to grab a bowl and chopsticks. He passed the bowl of noodles through the slot. Eat. Kakashi rolled his eyes in annoyance. I think we're done for now. You need to have better answers than what you gave me the next time you're questioned. She laughed mockingly. Sure, and I'll knit a sweater with these chopsticks and the threads from this blanket while I wait. She spit at his feet. Without another word, Kakashi turned and left, slamming the nearby door shut on his way out. Naomi shook her head and finished eating her noodles, leaving the egg for last. After several hours of being left alone with nothing to keep her occupied, Naomi half considered actually trying to knit a sweater using the chopsticks in the fraying blanket. She had just picked up the chopsticks from out of the bowl when she heard the door from down the hall open and close. Quickly, she put the chopsticks down and went to the bars to see who was coming towards her. Her heart skipped a beat at the sight of him. Kabuto, she exclaimed, recognizing him despite his disguise. What are you doing here? She answered her own question before he did. He was here to get her and take her back to Orochimaru. A wave of dread fell over her. Releasing our kitsune from jail, of course. Kabuto replied obviously, pulling out a ring of keys. Lord Orochimaru wants to see you right away, he said, unlocking the door and letting her out. Of course he does, Naomi muttered to herself more than to him. It's not that urgent, is it? Kabuto looked at her. He's impatient at this time. Testing what little patience he has left is definitely not worth a try. She hung her head. Don't feel so bad. This is the first time you've failed him in quite some time. It'll be fine, he assured her, cupping her face with his hands. Naomi tried to give a convincing smile. Naomi didn't feel that Kabuto lied to her, she felt Kabuto just didn't know. As soon as he shut the door to the lab behind him, she was at Orochimaru's mercy. The first hit didn't hurt as much as the next several that followed. She had begged him to listen between the hits, but he wouldn't have it. I didn't say anything, she cried helplessly, attempting to use her arms to block him from hitting her face. They didn't learn anything. Orochimaru clenched his teeth and threw her to the ground, holding a foot on her throat. You think they didn't learn anything? He roared, putting pressure on her neck as she struggled against him. They know what to guard now. It doesn't matter if you said a word. He removed his foot from her throat, causing her to choke in air. He kicked her, making sure she would stay on the ground. You failed. You're lucky I haven't killed you by now, he exclaimed between kicks. Naomi pushed herself up to her knees, still catching her breath after he had finished releasing his anger. Her face and chest ached where he had kicked her. Her nose dripped blood down her face and onto the floor. She felt Orochimaru grab hold of her hair, dragging her across the stone floor towards a closet. She cried out in pain, reaching for his arm to relieve the tension from her head. He had practically thrown her into the closet, shutting the door behind her. There was no need to lock the door, there was no door knob from the inside. Let me out, she cried, slamming her hands against the wood. Let me out. It was dark in the closet except for the light coming between the door and the floor. It was extremely small, hardly any room for her to even be able to lie comfortably. Naomi swore the walls were closing in on her, causing her to cry out even more. Between her hitting the door and her voice, Naomi didn't hear the hissing of multiple snakes quickly coming towards her. She screamed loudly when they slithered underneath the door, giving no warning before biting at her ankles. Her blood immediately felt like it was on fire from the snake's venom. Her head felt dizzy, making her lose her balance and fall inside the closet, hitting her head on the wall and floor with a loud thump. Her vision went black. 1 year before the Nine Tails attack, 10 years of age. Abba, Naomi yelled from outside her home. Abba, come look, come look. Her urgent call prompted the response of the very muscular man to run outside. Is everything okay? He asked, coming up beside where the child crouched. Look at this weird bug, she said with a giggle, holding a colorful caterpillar up to his mustached face. Isn't it gross? Abba forced a smile. Yes, Naya, it's very gross, he replied, moving her hand away from his face. Put him over there on the bush so he doesn't get squished. Yes, Abba, she obeyed, setting it on one of the leaves. She continued to crouch, closely watching the caterpillar inch its way down the stem. Abba was constantly surprised at this girl's innocence. After surviving the horrors of the war and being orphaned because of it, he was surprised she hadn't been hardened by her harsh reality. She must have been too young to understand, he figured. Naomi knew this man wasn't actually her father, but rather someone who had picked her up off the streets before human traffickers could. With no one around to watch her, the criminal decided she may be useful to him with his weapons and drug trading. This was better for her than being sold to anyone, he reasoned. Being a man such as himself, with the outward appearance of a bear, he was extremely surprised to be so gentle towards this little girl. Abba certainly was too soft for his own good. Abba went back inside the house. Although, he wouldn't have really called it a house rather than a two-room shack. The outside of the house looked as if no one had done any maintenance on it in years. Abba kept it this way in case someone came looking for him and would think nobody was living there. The inside, however, was furnished quite nicely, but sparingly. The wood floors were clean, yet the fire pit was full of ash. Off to the left side was a short table with 2 cushions and a rug underneath. Beneath the rug was a secret door to a small cellar, big enough to store a bit of Aba's product, with plenty of room to spare. Naomi had been instructed to hide in there in case something ever happened. Against the far wall was multiple shelves and drawers for various items Aba kept out of Naomi's reach. To the right of the fire pit were sliding doors that opened to where they slept. Minutes later, Naomi came crashing into the house. Aba, she cried, holding something brown and furry up to him. Aba, we have to help it. He looked down at the injured rabbit in her hands, its leg badly twisted. He frowned. I dunno, Naya, he said sadly, kneeling down to her level. It doesn't look like he's doing too good. But, Aba, she sniffled. I didn't mean to chase him to break his leg. He was taken aback for a moment. Chase? What were you chasing him for? Naomi shrugged. I thought it would be fun, I suppose, she replied, blinking the tears out of her eyes. Aba sighed heavily, stroking her disheveled black hair. Here, let's at least make him comfortable. He stood and went to find a small box, putting a dish towel in the bottom of it as a cushion. She set the rabbit carefully onto the towel, cooing softly at it. Much to Naomi's dismay, the rabbit didn't survive for much longer. Aba had to comfort her for a few minutes, but as soon as he suggested making stew with the rabbit, she cheered up. With her stomach full of stew, Naomi crawled from the table to her bed, curling up comfortably in the heavy blanket and falling asleep quickly. Aba stayed awake cleaning up their dinner and was soon snoring loudly by the girl's side. Naomi awoke in the middle of the night, feeling as though someone was coming rapidly towards their house. She never understood this feeling. She had asked Aba about it once and he gave her a confusing reply, something about everyone having a thing called chakra and some people are able to sense other people's chakra. It was something shinobis always used. She had no idea what chakra was or what it had to do with her feeling other people's presence when she couldn't see them. Aba, Naomi whispered, moving from beneath his arm and shaking his shoulder to wake him. Aba, wake up, somebody's coming. Aba was awake immediately. How many are there? He asked urgently. The girl paused, holding out her fingers to count how many she sensed. 3, she announced, feeling proud of herself for remembering the number. Come, Naya, he ordered, leading her towards the secret door under the table. Hide in here. Don't come out until I get you, okay? He went to shut the door. Aba, wait, what is it? Can I have a light? He went to a nearby shelf and grabbed his lighter. Use this, but try to keep it off for as long as you can, okay? She nodded, taking the lighter from him. He kissed her forehead and helped her into the cellar. Stay here and keep quiet. He shut the door with a soft click. She could hear him pulling the rug over it and setting the table on top of that. It was quiet in the room above her now. She could sense that the 3 intruders were right outside the house now. She imagined they were looking in through the windows, with dripping fangs and wide, bulging eyes. She gasped, scaring herself with the image. She sensed Aba was standing still, a weapon in hand to defend himself. Silently, Naomi cheered Aba on as the sounds of battle came from beyond her hiding place. She could paint a picture in her mind of what was happening based on where she sensed the intruders were in the house. 2 of them had attacked Aba straight on while the third began ransacking their shelves and drawers, looking for anything to steal. Aba had thrown one of the intruders away from him, causing him to land on the small table, breaking it to pieces. Naomi gasped at the loud crash above her head. Her mouth stayed open in horror as she felt the man's soul leave his body. The other intruder had finished his search, turning his attention to helping his comrade fight off Aba. Aba had shoved the second attacker's face into the pile of coals, making him cry out in pain as he breathed in hot ashes and burned his skin. He blindly ran away from the house. His comrade came at Aba with more ferocity, attacking while he wasn't looking. This foe turned out to be stronger than Aba expected. After several minutes of fighting, this opponent had severely wounded him, leaving him to die on his front step. Aba had crawled his way back into the house, trying to keep from bleeding out. Before losing consciousness, he had managed to sear most of his wounds shut by heating a blade in the coals. His last effort to get to his little girl left him lying unconscious beside the corpse of the man on the shattered table. It was silent above her for too long. Aba, Naomi called out experimentally. She knocked her fist on the cellar door above her. Aba, She sensed him just outside the cellar door, so why wasn't he coming to her? She paused, feeling something warm and wet on her hand. She felt more warm liquid had begun to drip heavily onto her face. She pulled out the lighter from her pocket, flicking it on with her thumb. Blood was leaking through the door, dripping onto her and down the wall. She looked at her hand where she had hit it, seeing the deep, red color. The iron smell invaded her nose all at once, causing her to fall back in the cellar. The lighter went out when she let go of it, losing it in the dark. She screamed in terror. "Abba!" she cried, hitting the door with her fists as hard as she could. She tried using her shoulder to lift the door open. Blood continued to rain down on her as her efforts failed to lift the dead man off the door to let her out. "Abba, please, help me. AAA Abba, help." She felt as though the walls of the cellar were getting closer to her, the smell of the blood getting stronger, her attempts to get help weakening. She pressed herself against the walls, trying to keep them from crushing her between them. Abba. Naomi was trapped in the cellar for hours. She felt as though she would never get the stench of blood out of her nose. Eventually, she found the lighter she had lost, immediately flicking it on. She sat in the corner away from the bloody door, burning her fingers by holding down the lighter switch for so long. She did not hear the sounds of Abba moving the dead man off of the door, nor did she hear the creak of the door as it opened. He took the lighter from her hands, picked her up, and carried her out of the cellar. He hardly noticed, or at least didn't mention, the blood that drenched her hair and clothes. She clung tightly to him as they walked out of the house and into the early morning air. Naomi flinched when the door to the closet was opened, the sudden bright light blinding her momentarily. She hadn't really cared that she was lying in a pool of her own vomit, or that every muscle in her body ached, or even that she had dried blood down her face. She was unsure how long she had been in the closet, but it certainly felt like a long time. Kabuto helped her off the floor, her arm over his shoulders, leading her down several halls to her own room. He helped her clean off the blood and vomit before treating what remained of her injuries. "Wow," Kabuto commented, checking her torso as they sat on the edge of her bed. "After just 12 hours, the bruises on your ribs are almost healed already. I believe that's quicker healing than last time." Naomi stayed silent, letting him finish his examination. She winced when he touched her neck, which still felt tender and sore. "You even managed to heal yourself of poisoning. Not without having a few side effects though." She sighed heavily, carefully pulling a clean shirt over her head. "Is my nose at least on straight?" she asked, looking at him straight on. He smiled. "It's just fine. Still a little bit of blood though," he noted, handing her a cloth to clean it off. "Thanks," she muttered softly, wiping her nose. She felt exhausted. "Are you done with your examination?" she asked after a few moments of silence passed between them. "Oh, yes. I am." Kabuto stood, gathering his things. He paused, pushing his glasses up. "Did you want me to finish healing your ribs? Or your neck?" She shook her head, causing her neck some pain she immediately regretted. "That's not necessary. Save your chakra for something else." "Alright, get some rest. You need it. Don't need to tell me twice," she replied, lying down on her bed as he left the room, shutting the door softly behind him. 3 days after Naomi's arrest, Kakashi frowned at his drink. "But I thought she escaped." "I don't understand," he said, looking up at Hiruzen. "She did. More or less." Hiruzen took a sip from his own drink, earning a confused look from his younger colleague. "We let her escape, but we don't know who let her out." "Well, don't just sit there and be vague about it," Kakashi chastised. "What are we going to do?" "Nothing. You're kidding," he said in disbelief. Hiruzen shook his head. "The only thing we are doing is watching them. We watch the Kitsune to see what Orochimaru is up to. Intel is scarce, but we've caught word of Orochimaru performing more human experimentation." Kakashi grimaced. "If we can get the Kitsune to tell us where he's being doing this, we may be able to catch him red-handed. Other than that, we can't do anything until we know more." Kakashi nodded. "That's something." He thought back to Naomi. He didn't remember seeing anything unusual about her physical body. It was only when she attacked him that she appeared peculiar. But why not track down her rescuer to find out what Orochimaru is doing? We haven't been able to identify who that is. It's better we use her. Plus, it's easier to track someone with a unique chakra pattern. Hiruzen poured himself more to drink. But you let her escape. How can we get anything out of her now? It was obvious he did not approve of this plan. Hiruzen laughed. Oh, Kakashi, you worry too much. Wait until those drinks you've had have gone through your system. You'll feel better in the morning. Kakashi continued to frown as he dismissed himself, saying good night to Hiruzen. Kakashi awoke the next morning feeling as though he hadn't slept at all, but it had nothing to do with what he had drunk the night before. He got up and dressed, leaving his apartment to go clear his head. After his habitual visit to the memorial, he went outside the village gates to a nearby lake to sit on the shore. The still water calmed his buzzing mind as he stared across to the other side. A gentle, warm breeze blew through the trees that surrounded the lake, ruffling his hair to the opposite side of his head. He took a deep breath, attempting to relax in the shade of a tree. He was frustrated that Naomi had been set free after she had hardly been in custody for a full day. He suspected there was more to her criminal activities than just her ties with Orochimaru. There were so many questions he wanted to ask, mostly to get information out of her about what she had done for Orochimaru, but a few were questions he had about herself. Her file said she was a kitsune, but he had only known of kitsunes to be characters in old folklore. A folklore was typically untrue and only used to teach children good and bad behavior. He had genuine curiosity towards her and only wanted his questions answered. Kakashi's first day off in weeks was not moving quickly enough for him. He needed something to do. Standing up, he began to search for flat rocks to skip across the water. He found several, putting them into his pocket to collect before throwing them. After finding a good pocketful, he watched as each rock sailed across the lake, skipping close to the middle of the water. As he watched, he noticed figures on the other side of the lake, chasing after someone. He didn't think much of them as they ran out of sight, turning his attention to the ground to look for more flat rocks. He looked up again as he heard shouts and jeers getting louder. Suddenly, someone came running at him, nearly running him over. He caught her arm before she fell to the ground. Kakashi was surprised. You, Naomi echoed, catching her balance. Man, this day could not get any worse. Where'd the bitch go? Someone called loudly. Come here, little foxy. Naomi looked towards the direction of the voice, instantly trying to wrestle her arm out of Kakashi's grip. Please, you have to let me go. Kakashi looked at her suspiciously, keeping a strong hold on her. How do I know you didn't steal anything from these people? He eyed the katana hanging from her hip. He didn't remember her having one before. Ow, because if I did, I would have been dead a long time ago. She replied hurriedly. Now please, let me go. Or hide me. Something. It was too late. The trio that had been chasing her had found the duo. Oh, there you are, said the man in the middle. He brushed his short, yellow hair out of his equally yellow eyes. We'll be taking her off your hands, he said, smiling. Kakashi looked between the three of them. They were all heavily armed with various swords and other weapons. The man to the right was large and dark-skinned, his dark hair pulled back with a green bandana. Still out of breath from the chase, his chest heaved up and down as he attempted to look intimidating. The woman on the left didn't look much older than Kakashi himself, but had obviously tried to cover her face with enough makeup to appear older. None of them wore a village headband, so Kakashi suspected their loyalties were similar to Naomi's. He didn't like them at all. Kakashi pushed Naomi behind him, much to her surprise. He continued holding on to her, but had loosened his grip some. Why should I just hand her over? He asked. Listen, we don't want much trouble, Yellow Eyes started, putting his hand up. This man is a part of Anbu, the woman interrupted, pointing at the swirling tattoo on Kakashi's upper arm. Well, Liza, said the man on the right, I guess that means we can't let him escape. He now knows our faces as well, Yoshi. We'll see what Shinju can do with the two of them back home, said Ki, pulling out two of his swords. Run, Naomi hissed in Kakashi's ear as he drew out a kunai. What are you doing? Run, I said. You're coming with me, he hissed back. I still have questions for you. She rolled her eyes. That's ridiculous. I can take care of myself here. Just go. That's not the issue, Kakashi argued, barely dodging a blow from Liza as she ran at him from his blind spot. He had let go of Nyame's arm to keep blocking Liza's attacks. Nyame had drawn her own katana from its hilt, blocking a strike from Ki. With each clash of their blades, she noticed he was pushing her further towards the lake. She growled and bared her teeth at him as her feet splashed in the water. Ki smiled widely. Can't use your fire if you're wet, little fox. How about a quick swim? He taunted. She growled again, pushing against him, but with hardly any effect. Her feet were sinking into the mud. Time for a swim, Ki announced, swinging his foot around and kicking her into the water with a cold splash. She raced to get back up and grab her katana before it was lost beneath the water, but Ki had his swords crossed at her neck, making her freeze. She felt the hilt of her sword right at her fingertips. Don't move. Move and your Anbu friend is dead, Ki warned. She glanced over where Kakashi had been fighting Liza and Yoshi, finding him unconscious on the ground at Yoshi's feet, his own kunai at his throat. You make a hard bargain, Nyame said with a small laugh. She slowly put her hands up in reluctant surrender. He grinned at her defeat. Don't worry about your katana, he said. I'll get it before we leave. He turned his own sword around in his hand, hitting her across the head with the hilt. Nyame slowly opened her eyes, finding she had been unceremoniously tossed over Yoshi's shoulder. Her bound hands bounced against his back with every step he took. Her head throbbed, the pain increasing as her vision cleared. To her right, she saw Kakashi was also tossed over Yoshi's other shoulder, but was still unconscious. She wondered how a ninja, such as himself, could have been defeated seemingly so easily. Yoshi, Nyame said painfully, let me walk. Oh, you're awake. Ki, what do you think? Yoshi asked, calling to his companion who was walking ahead of him. Let her walk. This guy is heavier than she is. If she's awake enough to do it. Liza, keep hold of her, Ki ordered. Yoshi stopped and let Nyame slip from his shoulder, not bothering to be careful as she fell. She stood up slowly, finding it only a little difficult to keep her balance. She felt lightheaded, but could feel the pain of her head decreasing as the injuries healed. They walked on in silence. Nyame already knew where they were going. These three worked for a heartless woman by the name of Shinju. She had run into her plenty of times with Abba. Abba had long tried to get her to work with him within the weapons trades to increase profits, but she was very selfish. Shinju had long hated the two of them. What's Shinju going to think when you three bring back an Anbu member from the Leaf Village? Nyame asked with a sly smile. I don't think she'd be very happy you brought a police officer to her home. Especially so uninvited. Ki stopped and looked between Liza and Yoshi. We don't have any reason to kill him, he replied nonchalantly. Besides, said Liza with a shrug, it's not like he knows where we're going. He won't be awake unless we say so. Nyame her head. Then why even bring him along with? He'll know the ins and outs of Konoha, Yoshi replied, adjusting Kakashi on his shoulder. He can tell us how to best smuggle things in and out. Nyame began to laugh so hard she fell to the ground. You're kidding, right, Ki? Liza. She laughed more, trying to compose herself. Hell, I could have done that for you. You probably won't even be able to get anything out of him. They're trained that way, you know. Listen, Kitsune, Ki said, suddenly pointing a sword in her face. If Shinju wants to get that information out of him, then so be it. If she wants you as a plaything to beat around every so often, then that's what will happen. Shinju gets what she wants. He lowered the blade to her throat, pressing it hard against her skin. In the meantime, shut up until we get there. Nyame glared at him, but kept her mouth shut. They continued to walk on. Kakashi awoke to someone slapping his face. Hey, Kakashi, wake up. You aren't dead, are you? He looked up into Nyame's brown eyes. Oh, good. You're not. Great predicament you've gotten us into, she said sarcastically as she sat down on the floor across from him with a heavy sigh. If you had just run when I said to, we wouldn't be literally down a hole right now. Kakashi creased his brow. What are you? He began to ask as he looked up. She was right. The walls of the hole were easily 40 meters high. A net was strewn across the top, keeping them trapped inside. Past the net, he could see the sun was beginning to set with the changing of the colors. Where are we? I said. Naomi replied sharply, curling up against the opposite wall, literally down a hole. You don't remember coming here, do you? He shook his head. Good. It's better that you don't. She wouldn't look at him. He stared at her, curious as to why she seemed so mad at him. Are you saying that I was the one who got us put down here? Sighing again, Naomi pulled off one of her shoes and threw it at him. Hey. Yes, it's your fault. If you hadn't been holding my arm, I would have been able to take them out myself. He tossed the shoe back to her. Why didn't you do it before you ran into me? He argued. I was trying to find a safe place to do it, she replied, glaring at him. I didn't want to hurt anybody besides them. Do what? This. Naomi held out her hand, her palm facing up. Slowly, a small flame began to grow in her hand. After it had grown to the size of a small ball, she grimaced, quickly clenching her hand into a fist, extinguishing the light. She held her fist to her chest. It's called kitsunebi. I didn't want to hurt anyone with that. Kakashi stared at her fist. That's amazing. How do you do that? Not easily, she said quietly, opening her hand again to examine it. He thought about it for a moment. Was that something Orochimaru gave you? One of the experiments he did to you? She looked at him in surprise, but her expression soon changed to a mixture of pain and anger. No, I've had this skill for as long as I can remember. He has taken it away from me. She avoided looking at him again, going back to examining her hand. Kakashi sat against the wall behind him. He vaguely remembered something about some kitsunes being able to control fire, but he wasn't sure what he could trust from old folklore. Tell me something, he started, but she interrupted him. If you're going to ask me questions about Orochimaru, I'm not going to tell you anything about him. She had put her shoe back on. He shook his head. No, I won't ask you about him this time. Then what? She challenged. Kakashi's mind raced to find the first question he wanted to ask. He wished he had written them down somewhere. He wondered whether he should ask about herself first, or about her ties with Orochimaru, or about her ties with the people who chased her, or why they had been put down in this hole in the first place. Why were the three of them chasing you? He asked, finally deciding on a question. They were the ones who put us down this hole, right? More or less, she replied. They work for a woman named Shinju. She was an old colleague, I guess you could say. Never did like me. What does Shinju want? Naomi shrugged. She wants me dead as far as I know. Why I'm still alive is an even bigger mystery. A long silence passed between them. You know, Kakashi began, I never have heard of a real-life fairy tale. She looked at him confused. What are you talking about? You're a kitsune, right? Part fox, part woman. She nodded. Then, does that mean all the other folklore characters exist? She nodded again. So, then are you like a Bakeneko? You can change yourself into a fox. It's very difficult now and takes a lot of energy. Sort of an emergencies only type thing. His mind was soaking up this information from her. He racked his brain trying to remember what else he knew about kitsunes, which wasn't much. He was about to ask her another question when Kakashi noticed she looked extremely tired. Whether that was from being chased or from creating kitsunebi, he wasn't sure. She was curled up against the wall again, her eyes closed. He looked up, seeing stars through the net instead of the orange colors he saw earlier. The temperature was dropping quickly in the pit. Kakashi shivered as he suddenly remembered something he had read about kitsunes. They were only capable of being loyal to a single person. Was Orochimaru that person for her? Naomi, who are you loyal to? The words were out of his mouth before he could put more thought into it. Immediately, she opened her eyes and looked over at him. What do you mean? Her tone asked him to explain himself for asking such a question rather than to clarify the meaning of his words. He went ahead with his curiosity. Isn't it that kitsunes can only be loyal to one person at a time? Is that why you're so defensive about Orochimaru? Naomi glared at him. You can be loyal to different people in different ways, she answered sharply. You ask too many questions. She turned away from him again, avoiding his gaze. He stayed silent, shivering again. There was nothing here to keep either of them warm. No blankets or anything to start a fire. Kakashi thought about making one himself using his chakra, but concluded it would be a waste. He didn't know when he might need it since they had taken all of his physical weapons. He looked over at Naime again, wondering how she wasn't shivering like he was. In the darkness, she appeared to already be asleep. In actuality, she was far from sleeping. Naime worried what Orochimaru would think if he knew where she was. He had already punished her before for getting caught by the Anbu, but what would he do if she didn't return to him in time? He would leave me behind, she thought sadly. He would leave me to die. But, he promised me. She closed her eyes tightly, shutting out any tears. Kakashi was engulfed in his own thoughts as well. He felt his knowledge on criminal activities outside of the leaf was fairly low. Though it was technically his day off, the opportunity he had to investigate this organization, whoever they were, was something he could not ignore. On some level, he was following the Third's orders to watch the Kitsune. She was involved in more than just being a lab rat for Orochimaru. There was more information she knew, yet refused to tell him. He was determined to figure it out. Kakashi awoke quickly, realizing he had had the nightmare about Rin again. His arm was outstretched in front of him, as though he still hadn't pulled his arm out of her chest. The sound of chirps still rang in his ears. Rin's voice echoed through his mind. It was still dark, roughly early morning, he guessed. The memories of the day before danced in his head, reminding him of where he was. He sat up on the pit floor, looking around in the growing light. He didn't see Naime at first, but felt her arm around him, falling from his chest to his waist as he sat up. Her skin felt unusually warm as he carefully moved her arm to avoid waking her. However, he swore she had fallen asleep across the room from him. He shook his head, not sure what to think about her. He realized though, that while he had been shivering almost non-stop, she slept soundly, not even bothered by the cold. Did her kitsunebi keep her from freezing? It made some sense. But still, she had slept next to him to keep him warm. She had been angry with me, he thought. Why would she sleep beside me? He stayed awake, pacing on the floor, wondering how they were going to escape from the pit. He had already climbed up the walls to examine the net, finding someone had also put metal spikes across it. The sour smell wafting from the spikes told him they were poisonous. He sighed irritably and went back to the bottom of the pit where Naime had just awakened. Anything interesting up there? She asked with a yawn. Not especially, he replied. He watched her run her fingers through her hair. Tell me what you know about these people, he demanded after several minutes. You said this woman Shinju was an old colleague. A colleague in what? How do you know her? You never are off the job, are you? She asked, braiding her hair over her shoulder. Just answer me, he said irritably. He did not feel like letting her avoid his questions again. She paused in braiding her hair to look up at him. You're very pushy, you know that. He kneeled in front of her, coming down level with her. I'm not playing your game again, Fox. You'll answer me or I'll make you talk, he threatened, lifting his headband. She glared at him, finishing the braid. Fine, but put that thing away, she said, pointing to his Sharingan. He pulled his headband back down. If you were wondering, Orochimaru has no connections to Shinju, at least none that I know. She mainly deals in weapons trading, but does dabble in drug trades. She's selfish and cruel. She only cares about herself, her son, Ryu, and her profits. However, Ryu is nothing like her. How long have you known her? She thought for a moment. Since I was 11. My father knew her long before I came along. Kakashi sat down in front of her. Your father, does he do the same types of trading? Naime shook her head. He did. And you learned the trade from him. Everything I know. But he didn't teach you how to read. She glared at him again. There was no time. Plus, it's mostly unimportant anyway. I know what I need to and that gets me around. Kakashi shook his head, not knowing what to think about her. He sighed heavily, turning his head up to look out. Well, how about we get out of here? I think I have an idea on how to get out. Her eyes widened. How are we gonna do that? We don't know when, or if, they'll be back. He stood still looking up at the net. Well, they won't be back anytime soon. If this woman would rather have you dead, Then she's probably going to leave you here to see how long that would take. He looked down at her. Come on. I have an idea, he said, holding out his hand to help her up. She eyed his hand, standing up on her own. What do you have in mind? He gestured to his upper body. Put your arms around me and I'll pull us both up the side of the pit. She crinkled her face. What about the net? I figure I can cut away enough for us to slip out. I don't know if they'll be tipped off that the net's been broken, so it's probably best we go at the same time. She continued to look at him with disdain. He crossed his arms. What? Do you have a better idea? Or do you have a problem touching me now? I have no problem touching you, she growled. She sighed heavily and looked upwards. I guess we have no other choice, she said defeatedly. Fine. Let's go. They both moved towards the wall, quickly discovering the trip up the wall would be more awkward than either of them wanted. Naomi put her arms around his neck and her legs around his torso. She hated to admit she needed Kakashi's help out of the pit, so she kept her mouth shut, pressing her cheek against his neck. Kakashi was glad he was strong enough to lift both of them up the wall. She was heavier than he expected her to be from her short height. Finally, they reached the net. Now what? Naomi asked, carefully adjusting her grip. She avoided looking down. Well, Kakashi said with a grunt, I think if I cut it in the right spot, it won't fall on us and poison us. I hope you're right, she muttered, shutting her eyes tightly. He reached up to where the net was fastened to the wall, focusing the chakra in his hand to cut the rope. After several minutes, the hole was finally large enough for them to climb through and out to freedom. Naomi crawled over Kakashi to reach the ground first, only turning back to help him up. He laid down on his back, catching his breath and resting his sore arms. That was quite the trip, he said, panting. Naomi, we should, he started, sitting up. She was gone. Naomi. Quickly, he jumped to his feet, looking around him. She was nowhere to be seen. Kakashi sighed irritably. You're welcome, he muttered to the silent trees around him. Kakashi would not see Naomi for nearly 2 years. He had thought about her every so often, but had no idea what had happened to her after their escape from the pit. As far as he guessed, she had gone back to Orochimaru. As for Shinju and any of her people, he had managed to pick up evidence of her drug trades, but never found a definite trail. Kakashi found himself staring out over the village from the balcony of his apartment. It was nighttime, the village quiet as it slept. He heard the occasional owl hooting in the distance and the faint breath of wind blowing through the trees. All felt peaceful. He sighed, turning to go back inside, when something caught his eye. He stood, fixed on the figure running down the street. They stopped at every door, knocking loudly. Please, you have to help me, called a female voice. Someone. Kakashi noticed she was holding her right hand to her chest. Please, is anybody there? Quickly, Kakashi sped downstairs to his door, just as she was passing by. Hey, he called out to her. She turned around. What's wrong? He asked as she approached. When she came into the light of the doorway, he instantly recognized her. Naomi. She stopped instantly, her eyes wide. Blood was dripping down her arm, staining her clothes. She shook her head as she turned to run away. Wait, Kakashi cried as he ran after her. He caught her shoulder, being careful not to injure her any further. Are you hurt? I can help you. Naomi screamed when he touched her, the cry echoing loudly in his ears. Kakashi instantly let go of her. She was in hysterics. He could plainly see the whites of her eyes in the darkness. She suddenly curled up into a ball on the ground and softly whimpered to herself. People in nearby houses awoke, turning on the lights in their bedrooms, lightly illuminating the street. Kakashi was unsure of what to do. He didn't know if she screamed because of his touch or because she was injured, but he needed to get her inside to treat her. He knelt down beside her. Naomi, I'm not going to hurt you, he told her gently. I'm going to take you inside my home and treat your wound, okay? After a moment, she nodded slowly. Okay, come on. He helped her up and led her inside. Once inside, Naomi seemed jittery. She shuffled her feet side to side and stared wide-eyed around the small apartment. Kakashi noticed she had changed since he last saw her. She was slightly taller now, but was still much shorter than him. Her face was thinner, her eyes more hollow, but she looked more adult. Her hair was still raven black, but was terribly tangled and messy. Sit here, Kakashi said, pointing to a single wooden chair. He left to get his first aid kit. When he returned, she was standing in the doorway to leave. Where do you think you're going? He asked sternly. Sit down and let me treat you before it gets infected. It'll heal, she replied quietly, staring at the floor like a child who had just been caught doing something wrong. Not before you'll have to have your arm amputated, he countered. Sit. Reluctantly, Naomi came back to the chair. What happened to you? He asked as she carefully removed the blood-soaked shirt. She didn't answer him and avoided his gaze. Her whole right arm was covered in deep cuts, some still bleeding heavily. Kakashi worked quickly, cleaning around the wounds, putting pressure to her arm to stop the bleeding, and giving them clean dressings. Just by looking them over, he deduced the wounds were self-inflicted. He went to his bedroom and grabbed another shirt for her. Here, he said, helping her carefully put on the shirt. She still looked down at the floor, anywhere but at his face. He couldn't help but notice how thin she was, the shirt hanging loosely off of her small figure. He also saw small pinprick dots on her inner left arm. Naomi, he said quietly, staring at the scabs, what's happened to you? Her eyes widened in fear. Her mouth stayed agape. I was trying to stop myself from injecting any more, I don't want to do them anymore. Kakashi stayed silent. Naomi began to weep. You have to help me. Please. I'll do anything you ask. With her non-injured arm, she grabbed at his shirt. Kakashi stood dumbfounded. Last he knew, she hated him for no reason, now she was begging for his help. Was she up to something? His thoughts went back to her connection to Orochimaru. Was she still working for him? And if so, she would have been one of his longer experiments. He didn't push her hand away, but gently pried her fingers from his shirt. Listen, I know someone who can help you. It'll just take her a few days to get here. She looked up at him, her eyes surprised. In the meantime, he said, standing up, I'm taking you to the hospital. You need more attention for those wounds. He left her still sitting in the chair, going towards his bedroom. I'll give my friend a call first. Kakashi didn't trust her. He needed to contact Anbu to let them know where Naomi was. No one had seen her in those 2 years and everyone who knew about her figured Orochimaru killed her in an experiment. As horrible as the thought was, most had accepted that as truth. He was serious about getting her help though. He dialed a few numbers onto the phone and put the receiver to his ear, hearing the familiar trill of the ring. A female voice picked up. Hello. Kairi. It's me, he answered. Kakashi. Kairi said in surprise. Haven't heard from you in a while. What can I do for ya so late at night? I've got a case for you. She needs help. Brought in a stray. Kakashi sighed, looking out his bedroom door to make sure Naomi was still sitting in the chair. She was. More or less. She's got some sort of drug addiction and she's hurt herself. Oh, dear. Sounds awful. Kakashi heard shuffling sounds as if she had been reclining and was now hurrying to pack a bag. I'll be over right away. I'm going to take her to the hospital and get her treatment there first. I know there's some people with Anbu that may want to talk to her as well. Kairi paused. Kakashi, really? You've just helped a poor woman and now you're throwing her under the bus like that? He sighed again. This isn't the first time I've met her. I know she's a criminal. Been missing for a couple years now. You don't know a thing about her. Kairi protested. I'll be there by tomorrow night. Don't you dare tell anyone else from Anbu about her until I say so. She immediately hung up with a loud click. Kakashi grimaced, putting the phone back down. He turned to look at Naomi again. She sat quietly, still looking at her lap. Granted, he thought, it had been a few years now so maybe something has changed. But she still broke the law and had never been properly brought to justice for it. Kakashi walked back into the main room. Come on, he said, standing in front of her. Let's get you to the hospital. Quietly, Naomi obeyed, following behind him. Naomi screamed, straining against the cuffs around her wrists that held her to the hospital bed. Quote. Naomi, please, cried the nurse as she attempted to stop her from moving. You'll reopen your wounds. She turned her head towards the door. I need some help in here. That Sharingan user. He tricked me. She continued to thrash around on the bed. More people rushed into the room, moving to grab at any thrashing limb. He tricked me. He's tricked me. She continued to scream as the nurse grabbed a sedative and attempted to put it into Naime's vein. No, she yelled, trying to yank her arm away in a panic. She felt warmth rising to her eyes, a burning sensation in her chest. Immediately, all the nurses and doctors touching her bare skin released her, their skin singed from the sudden heat. Everyone stared at her in shock as she laid back, eyes closed, and chest heaving as she caught her breath. Don't you dare touch me with that thing. She felt a sudden heat leaving her body as she continued to catch her breath. Don't touch me. You need to let them treat you, Naime, a voice said from the foot of her bed. She didn't have to open her eyes to know who it was. Get out of here before I kick your Hitaki, she threatened. You have no reason to do so anyway. I've done nothing but help you. Naime sat up, glaring daggers directly at Kakashi. Oh yeah, then why the hell am I chained to a damn hospital bed? Some help you've been. He crossed his arms. You would have bled to death last night if I hadn't done anything. You're welcome. The hospital staff stood awkwardly off to the side as they uncomfortably watched the scene. He turned to them. Leave. They immediately obeyed. Naime didn't break her eyes from his face once as they filed out. I was coming off of a high. It would have been better if you hadn't helped me. I thought you were being Orochimaru's science project. Kakashi said coldly. That's where you've been these last few years, right? Just needed a bit of extra help after an experiment gone wrong. Maybe spy a little bit while you're at it. I will cut your tongue out of your mouth, Naime hissed. Ooh, touchy. Kakashi was unsure why he felt like egging her on. He figured she would accidentally blurt something out of anger, telling him about any of her criminal activities. He had no reason to keep her as a friendly ally, especially when her eyes held such hatred for him. She reminded him of a trapped animal. Alright, so if you weren't playing guinea pig with Orochimaru, what have you been doing? She spat, attempting a kick to his chest, her foot barely reaching him. Kakashi didn't flinch. Try that again and see me put cuffs on your ankles too, fox. She continued to glare at him, baring her teeth. For the record, she said, Orochimaru has something of mine that I would like to get back. Get that for me and I'll tell you whatever you want to know. He narrowed his eyes. So you do or don't want help. You're sending mixed signals. He did consider her offer though. On one hand, she has valuable information that Anbu had been trying to get for years. On the other hand, she could be lying and only trying to get out of an arrest. You'll get nothing from me if I don't have it back, Naime continued. Curiosity got the best of him. What did he steal from you? She was reluctant. My kitsunebi. She wasn't sure if he would believe her, but without it, even with only a portion of it gone, she would eventually die. You remember what that is, don't you? He leaned forward, balancing on his hands and shaking his head in disbelief. You just burned those people who were trying to help you a few minutes ago. What do you mean he's stolen your foxfire? She was quiet for a moment. Well, not all of it, she admitted, but I still need it back. He straightened up. I'll make sure your request is considered, he told her plainly, turning to leave. Hey, she yelled after him. He didn't turn back. Hello, a bright woman said as she entered Naime's hospital room, jolting Naime awake. She had peppery black hair tied into a bun on the top of her head. She wore red circular glasses over her yellow eyes. In her hands she held a brown briefcase. I'm Kairi. I'm a friend of Kakashi's. She sat down on the right side of her bed, holding the briefcase in her lap. I'm here to help you. She smiled widely, exposing white teeth. Naime shifted uncomfortably, not liking Kairi's too friendly introduction. Your name's Naime, right? Mind if I call you Naya, for short? It'll make things much easier. Kairi didn't give her a chance to reply. Let's take a look at your arm, Naya, Kairi continued, reaching for her bandaged arm. Naime pulled her arm away as far as the restraints would allow her to, which wasn't very far. Don't touch me, she warned, baring her teeth. Ooh, Kakashi warned me about this. Kairi sighed, unclasping the locks on her briefcase. That's why I brought these with me, she said, pulling out a pair of black gloves and slipping them over her hands. Can't burn me with these. She smiled again and wriggled her fingers. Naomi stared dumbly at the older woman, unsure of how to react around her. Gently, Kairi took Naomi's arm and began to unwrap the bandage. Just gonna take a look-see here, her. Kairi blinked, staring at the pale skin of Naomi's arm. What the? She continued to unwrap the rest of the bandage, finding her whole arm had healed. She set her arm down, took off the gloves, and stood. I'll be right back, she said, practically running out of the room. Kairi ran down the hall where she found Kakashi talking with some fellow Anbu members. I need to speak with you, she said urgently, pulling him aside. Kairi, I was just about to leave. What do you need? He asked, feeling annoyed. You just called me out here last night, she replied. He nodded. Yeah, I did. What's your point? Her arm is totally healed. There's nothing for me to look at. Other than being a little thin, she doesn't look totally unhealthy either. But, still, Kairi crossed her arms, whatever drug addiction she may have, she doesn't show it. She shook her head. What's going on with that young woman? What aren't you telling me about her? Kakashi sighed and brought his voice down to a whisper. Listen, she's a kitsune, part fox, part woman. She's also been working for Orochimaru as a labrat for the last couple of years. The extent of her health is questionable. As for her ability to heal herself so quickly, I think that's something Orochimaru gave her, but it's hard to tell given what she is. She nodded. I see. Kakashi continued. Right now we're trying to figure out what exactly she's up to. We think maybe she needs help, Kakashi. Not an arrest warrant, Kairi interrupted, looking at him sternly. She wouldn't have shown up banging on people's doors if she wasn't looking for someone to legitimately help her. Where's your compassion? He exhaled, looking away from her. You're not allowing me to do my job, Kairi. She threw her hands up. Why don't you find some other way to do your investigation for a little bit? Maybe find someone else who knows her. Let her rest and then try talking to her. He turned back to face her. She's our only solid connection to finding Orochimaru right now, Kakashi argued, unintentionally raising his voice then quickly going back to a harsh whisper. We can use her to find him and stop him from doing any more experiments on people. Including her. Kairi was quiet. But, at the same time, she's not entirely innocent either. I've told you this before. Fine. If you won't do something, then I will, she said sharply, turning on her heels and marching back to Naomi's room. Hey, what are you going to do? Kakashi asked, following her. I'm gonna undo what shouldn't have been done in the first place. She stormed into Naomi's room, pulling back the white curtain. She jumped back in surprise, causing Kakashi to run into her. She's gone. The bed was empty, the bed sheets pushed away and the strangely unopened handcuffs lay vacant. The window was open widely, the curtains moving gently in the breeze. Kakashi moved Kairi aside. Damn it. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, leaning out the open window. She's turned herself into a fox. We've got to find her. You're going to go look for a fox. Good luck with that, Kairi said sarcastically, examining the still locked handcuffs. She's a criminal, Kakashi stated. He ran outside the room where the other Anbu officers stood. Kakashi, wait, Kairi called, running after him. You're really going to go after a fox when there's probably thousands of similar-looking foxes outside of the village? She can't have gotten far. Kakashi replied, leading the other officers out of the hospital, Kairi trailing behind them. Whenever she used her kitsunebi she got extremely tired. It may be the same thing when she changes to her fox. I can't go with you then, Kairi said, stopping in the middle of the street and watching them run down the road towards the outskirts of the village. Naomi couldn't believe her luck when that woman had left the room. It was good to know she could still recover so quickly. She was still worried she had used too much energy to burn the doctors and nurses, but sleeping helped her gain some of that energy back. She decided now was her time to move and to leave the hospital. If she stayed any longer, she was sure to be arrested for real. Changing into an animal was always an uncomfortable transition, but it was now or never. She watched her hands shrink and felt her bones tensing and relaxing as she changed form. When it was over, she paused a moment, how she felt. She felt freer in this form, no one would recognize her. She didn't feel as tired as she thought she might, which was good. Orochimaru hadn't taken this away from her too. The window had already been cracked open, all Naime had to do was nudge it open and push herself out onto the awning. She followed the awning towards the alleyway where she could safely jump onto a dumpster and then onto the ground. The rest of the trip would be her running to the woods where she would hide and sleep as much as she could. People jumped whenever they saw the fox run by their feet, startled at the animal being the middle of the village. Naime paused and looked back for a moment at a yellow-haired boy with green goggles on his head. They regarded each other, both feeling a strange connection, but she soon turned around and continued to make her way out of the village. As she ran, her heart burned with anger every time she thought of Kakashi and what he had done to her. A little voice in the back of her head told her she should have been grateful to him for the night before, but she ignored it. He was persistent at trying to get her in trouble. The voice in her head said it was because she had broken the law and deserved the consequences. She ignored this too. She continued to run until she was way out of the village and away from prying eyes. 9 years after the Nine Tails attack, 20 years old. Missing. Yes, blubbered a woman as she clutched a blue scarf in her hands. My son has been missing for nearly 2 days. No one has been able to find him and we don't know where he could have gone. Kakashi watched from a distance as the woman continued to sob. The officer taking her report looked uncomfortable, but sympathetic. This had been the 5th child to go missing in less than 2 weeks. What do you make of it, Hitaki? Miro asked, watching the woman as well. Kakashi shook his head. Sounds like kidnapping to me. Children don't just disappear like that. The pair had been to lead a group to find the missing children. It wasn't something they were normally to do, but it was part of the job. Let's get that woman's final report and add it to the pile. They got her report and pulled out the other reports they had, comparing the children to each other. They hadn't found much of a connection between them other than their age. All of the children were 7 years old. There has to be something else that connects them, Kakashi said, rubbing his tired eyes. All of the parents claim their children never came home after school, said Miro. Are they from the same neighborhood? Not sure, he replied, but let's see. He pulled out a map and marked where their houses were. They all come from the same 4-block radius near the edge of the village. Easy to nab them and take them outside of village limits. I'll go scout that area for clues, Miro said, writing down the addresses. Holler at me if you find something. I will, Kakashi replied, poring over the files again. Besides living near each other, he did not find much else to connect the children. Kakashi pushed away the papers in front of him. I'm going out for a walk, he said aloud to himself, standing up to walk outside, leaving the paperwork to the other investigators. This particular case seriously bothered him. Who would be horrible enough to steal school children? The information he knew rolled in his mind, over and over, but none of it made sense. Hardly any leads, no witnesses, and no known evidence to where they could have been taken. Before he knew it, Kakashi found himself outside of the village, completely engulfed in his own thoughts. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain on the back of his head. Ow, he yelled, putting his hand where a rock had hit him. He looked around, searching for who had thrown the rock. He caught a glimpse of long, raven black hair running in the opposite direction. He recognized the color, but he couldn't quite place where he had seen it. Immediately he gave chase to the figure. Hey, he called out, suddenly remembering her name. Naime. She didn't look back at him. He was faster than her, but she was swifter. Her small frame allowed her to dodge between the trees quicker than Kakashi could maneuver around them. Naime. He wasn't quite sure where she was leading him, but he kept an eye on her hair, which flew freely behind her and glimmered when the sun hit it. It suddenly struck him that he really admired the color of her hair. It reminded him of a raven's feathers with the faint tints of blue and pink when it reflected light. He was growing tired the further he chased her into the forest and away from the village. She stopped at the edge of a cliff overlooking a river. She looked down at the water below before turning around to face him. They both stood staring at each other, taking a moment to catch their breath. Naime spoke first. I know where those kids are. Kakashi blinked. You do. Where are they? She hesitated. How do you know about the missing kids? He continued before she could answer. Were you the one who kidnapped them? He felt himself getting angry at the thought of her being behind this crime. What's happened to them? She put her hands up in front of her and took a small step back. Whoa. Hey, I'm not the one who took them. I only know where they are. He took a step forward, prompting her to step back again. Where are they? I won't ask again. He felt his hand tingle as electricity gathered in his fingertips. Kakashi was done playing her games every time they met. He wanted a straight answer and he was going to get it without any distractions. Her eyes glanced to his right hand as she sensed the chakra gathering there. She still had her hands up. Listen, she started, taking another step back, but found the cliff only extended so far. With a high-pitched yelp, she slipped from the edge, falling into the water not far below. Immediately, Kakashi was at the edge of the cliff, quickly diving in after her. He swam towards her as she splashed about, unsuccessfully keeping her head above the water. He put his arm around her, pulling her towards the riverbank, his legs kicking hard against the current, his free arm grasping at the water in front of him. He pulled her onto the sand as she coughed and spat water. They lay in the sand, both catching their breath. Shit, Naomi muttered, coughing up more water. You seem to have a knack for things like this. She moved her soaked hair out of her face, turning to look up at him. Well, if you would stop needing help so much, we wouldn't have to deal with this, Kakashi retorted, sitting up. Swimming isn't a strength of yours, is it? She shot him a glare. When it catches you by surprise, it's a little more difficult. She gripped the edge of her shirt and twisted it, letting the water drip to the ground. He shrugged his now soaked vest off his shoulders, setting it aside on some nearby rocks. He took off his headband, keeping his eyes shut tight. He took off his shoes as well, pouring out whatever water remained. He turned back to Naomi, who remained sitting, now squeezing her wet hair with her hands. Now, tell me what you know about those missing children. I have quite a few families who are waiting to hear anything about them. She paused and looked up at him, her eyes full of sadness. What I tell you won't be good news, she admitted. She glanced at his right hand. There's no reason for you to use your electricity on me, she told him, looking back up at his face. I'm going to cooperate this time. Kakashi looked at her skeptically. How do I know that? She let go of her hair and held out her hands to him. Arrest me if you don't trust me. I help you get those kids, I'll get my Kitsunebi back. Still haven't gotten that back, have you? He crossed his arms as she shook her head. What makes you think helping me with these kids will help you get that back? She hesitated again. Because, she started, taking a deep breath before continuing, Orochimaru is using those kids for something. I'm not quite sure what. Tell me everything you know, Kakashi pressed. He watched her face contort as though it physically hurt to talk. He knelt beside her. Please, he said softly. Naomi shut her eyes tightly, feeling a sharp pain stab inside her head. She knew exactly what it was, but was unable to say it. She shook her head and tightly took hold of Kakashi's arm. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a small groan came out as the pain in her head grew. I can't. She finally managed to shout. The pain in her head lessened. I can't, she repeated. I can't. The pain dissipated like the air out of a balloon. Kakashi couldn't help but feel a slight bit of disappointment. He loosened her grip on his arm, putting her hand at her side. She felt his touch linger for a moment, but ignored it as she suddenly got an idea. I may not be able to tell you, she said, slowly standing up, but I think I'll be able to show you. Show me, he echoed, standing up as well. He wasn't sure what it was that made him think she was telling him the truth. There was something about her that seemed to be different. It may have been that she wasn't actually looking at him with hatred in her eyes. She seemed to legitimately want to help him. Or maybe because her wet clothes were clinging to her body, which, he had to admit, was distracting him much more than he wanted. She patted herself down, brushing the sand off of her wet clothes. It's a little further from here, she admitted. How much further? He asked. About a day's walk, she replied sheepishly. Kakashi huffed then shook his head. We'll need some provisions then. You don't have any with you already. I mean, I can fend for myself just fine, but what were you doing walking around in the woods? Certainly not for anything that required supplies. And even if I did bring some, they would have been washed away in the river, Kakashi replied, feeling his vest to see how dry it was. It was still damp. You'll have to come back with me to get some, he told her, shrugging on the damp vest. Go back with you to the village, Naomi said as she watched him tie his headband around his head. He sat down to put his shoes on. I can't go there. Why not? He asked. I'm not going to let you go anywhere by yourself anyway. You're a key part of an investigation. You're not going to be arrested. She frowned. Yet, she muttered. Besides, he continued, standing back up, you want your Kitsunebi back, don't you? You help me, I help you. That's the way this works. She continued to frown as he went to the water's edge to wash the sand from his hands. It shouldn't take long. I just have to grab a few things and fill in Miro on what's happening. Naomi groaned. Oh, great. He's your partner. He nodded. Yes, and you'll work with him if you don't want to be arrested, so suck it up. She glared at him, but he ignored her. Let's get going. We can't waste any more time. She began to follow him back towards the village when he suddenly stopped, quickly turning back to her. One more thing, he started, pointing a finger under her chin. If you try any games with me or Miro, there will be hell to pay. If you lie to either of us at any point, I won't hesitate to electrocute you. You tell the truth, be honest with us, and lead us to the missing children, we will work out a deal for you. And get my Kitsunebi back, Naomi added. Kakashi sighed irritably. No games, Fox. I mean it. She put her hand up. No games, she promised. He nodded. Good. After reaching the village gates, it took Kakashi some coaxing to get Naomi to enter the village. At first, she refused, promising she would stay just outside, waiting for Kakashi to return. He didn't trust her enough to stay as she promised, so instead, he reasoned to her that it would take less time if they went in together than if they separated. Finally, after several minutes of arguing back and forth, she agreed to go with him into the village. As they walked, Naomi kept staring at her feet, keeping Kakashi close ahead of her. She ran into his back when he suddenly stopped to the sound of someone calling his name. Kakashi. The voice belonged to a man in a green suit, with black bowl-cut hair, and large eyebrows. It's been too long, the man said, joyfully greeting his longtime rival. Kakashi looked as though he wished he were anyone else. Where have you been? Busy, he replied shortly, trying to push past him. Naomi grabbed onto the back of Kakashi's shirt so she wouldn't lose him in the growing crowd of the market. I don't have time to talk, Guy. Oh, Guy said disappointedly. He spotted Naomi standing close behind Kakashi, looking uncomfortable, quickly shifting his mood again. But who do we have here? He asked, smiling widely at his friend. He nudged him with his elbow, giving him a wink. Never seen you on a date before. No, Guy, he denied irritably. We're not here for that. He lowered his voice. I've been trying to find some missing children. She's my guide to finding them. We're just here to pick up supplies. Missing children, you say? Guy's face grew serious. Let me help. How many are missing? He asked, bringing his voice down to an almost whisper. 5, he replied. Make that 7, Miro said, walking up to them. 2 more were reported missing while you were gone, he told Kakashi. He spotted Naomi. What's she doing here? Kakashi started. I'm here to help, she said, letting go of Kakashi's shirt. I know where they are and who has them. You won't find them without me. She stared at him, daring him to deny her. Miro glanced between the two of them. Fine. He turned to his partner. You better explain what's going on here on the way. He turned to Guy. You're welcome to join us. We could use you. Guy smiled. You can count on me. The group gathered supplies for a few days' trip, getting extra for the children they would soon be rescuing. As they left the village, Miro barraged Naomi with questions on what she knew about the children. I promise to tell you what I can when we stop for the night. She snapped after feeling the stabbing pain in her head for the 4th time that day. There's only so much I'm able to tell you. Miro looked back at Kakashi, giving him an irritated look. Kakashi just shook his head and gave him a signal that meant, wait. Kakashi, Guy, Miro, and Naomi stopped for the night shortly after the sun went down. Miro got busy building a small fire while the rest of them set up their own sleeping areas. They worked in silence, each keeping to their own areas until Kakashi started to cook their meal of fish and rice. After portioning everyone with rice and a piece of fish, they said their thanks to Kakashi and began to eat. Guy paused looking between the three of them. Miro and Kakashi were both staring at Naomi while they ate, looking slightly impatient. She stayed focused on her food, purposely ignoring both of their stares. So, Guy started, setting down his bowl for a moment to talk and break the growing awkward silence. What is the plan to rescue the children? I need to go in alone, Naomi said before anyone else could respond. Miro scoffed. Absolutely not. What makes you think we'll let you do that? Kakashi added. Just at first. She responded quickly. I know the layout best. I've been in and out of there plenty of times. Plus you need someone to distract Orochimaru so you can get those kids out, right? She stared Kakashi down. Let me do it. Kakashi glanced at Miro, catching his eye. You just want to get your Kitsunebi, he accused. Her what? Guy asked, mouth full of rice. Kitsunebi, he repeated. She's a kitsune that's lost her fox fire. That's all she wants back. She doesn't actually care about getting those kids back to their families. Naomi slammed her bowl down, immediately standing up. That's not true, she cried, glaring piercingly at Kakashi. I know what he's doing to them. Those kids have. She sat back down, grabbing onto her head and biting back a sob as instantaneous pain stabbed through her head. Are you alright? Guy asked, kneeling beside her. She swatted his hand away. Don't touch me, she growled. Guy backed off, wondering what he did wrong. After a few minutes, the pain was virtually gone from her head. It's not true, she repeated. I do care about getting those kids back to their families. Getting my Kitsunebi back is only a part of it. How noble of you, Miro said mockingly. It's a good plan, I suppose, but you still have a personal goal involved. How do we know you aren't going to run off? She was quiet. I can't answer that. Then you don't go off alone. Kakashi looked her over. She looked defeated, tired even. That pain you get, is there a seal somewhere that prevents you from talking about certain things? She eventually nodded. Where is it? He asked. Maybe I can help with it. Slowly, she stood, moving her hair to one side and crossing her arms, reaching for the bottom of her shirt. She turned her back to them as she lifted it to reveal a black, beetle-like seal in the middle of her spine. It was no bigger than Kakashi's palm. I don't think there's much you can do with it, she said with a small voice. Orochimaru made it himself. Why a beetle? Asked Guy. Wouldn't it be more appropriate for it to be a snake? Ya no. Naomi shot him a look. A beetle crawls under the skin and can kill you from the inside. Something he's tried to do with me many times, she mumbled quietly. Guy looked down. Kakashi stood and made his way to her. She stood still as he examined the seal in the firelight. Do you mind? He asked. She nodded, giving him permission. He felt her stiffen at his touch, goosebumps crawling across her back. It was like a tattoo, a permanent part of her skin. I think I can at least release a part of it, if not the whole thing, he said after a while. It'll help loosen your tongue, for lack of a better term. He turned back to Miro. If we want to know anything in much detail, I have to at least try. Miro glanced to Guy. Naomi had let her shirt fall back down, turning back to face the fire. He sighed heavily. It's not like we have much of a choice. But first, could you draw us a map of Orochimaru's lair? In case you do run off, I would like to know where we could at least try to find a way in. She thought for a moment. I'll do it in exchange for a weapon. My sword was confiscated. Before Miro could answer, Kakashi was already reaching into his pouch, pulling out a kunai blade. It's all you get, he stated firmly, putting it into her outstretched hand. It's no sword, but you can at the very least defend yourself with it. Thank you, she said, smugly looking at Miro, pocketing the kunai. Miro shot his partner a glare. She moved past Guy to where Miro had pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. It took her several minutes to draw it, taking pauses to recollect her memory. There are some rooms I've never been in, so not everything is going to be on this map. The only route I would concern myself with is this one, she advised, pointing to an entrance on the side. From here, move quickly along this hall to here. I'm pretty sure that's where he's been keeping the kids when he wasn't working on them. Miro nodded thoughtfully, taking a closer look at what she had drawn. We'll find them no matter what obstacles get in our way, Guy said enthusiastically. Kakashi tapped her shoulder. Come on, let's take care of that seal. You two, he said, pointing to Guy and Miro, come up with a plan of action and we'll discuss it as a group when we get back. We won't be far. The pair walked away from the warmth of the fire, feeling it get noticeably cooler as they moved further into the darkness. Kakashi needed a quiet place away from distractions to concentrate on undoing this foreign seal. Finally, they came into a small clearing. They could still see the orange glow from their campsite, but it was far enough they would have privacy to do what needed to be done. Naomi stopped. You don't have to do this, she said, hugging her arms close to her body. Kakashi sighed. It's probably better for you when it's gone anyway. She shook her head. How do you know this will work? I don't, he said bluntly. He lifted his headband, keeping his Sharingan eye closed still. Turn around, he ordered. Slowly Naomi did as she was told, moving her hair off her back. She then lifted her shirt again, revealing the black beetle. She felt vulnerable with her bare back turned to him, though she didn't sense that he wanted to hurt her on purpose. He opened his Sharingan, observing her chakra signals around the seal. After several long minutes, he was finally able to see the puzzle of the seal itself. It was genius, really. With the Sharingan, he was able to see the beetle was quite literally attached to her spine, sending signals up to her brain. It was more than just a black mark on her skin. He would have to somehow sever the signals her brain was receiving and then remove the beetle one part at a time. He wasn't sure how this may hurt her or whether or not she would survive the removal, but he had to try. All right, Naomi, brace yourself. She braced herself against a tree, while Kakashi made his hands into multiple symbols before placing them on the beetle. The seal glowed pink while he slowly unraveled it, unsealing it from her body first. She cried out, wanting to jump away from him because of the pain, but knew it was too late for him to stop. She gripped tightly to the tree bark, feeling it scratch and tear the skin of her hands. Several tense minutes passed before he could try to unseal it from her mind. Suddenly he was no longer in the woods with her. He saw a boy with jet black hair and eyes as blue as the sky, pulling her by the arm through a house as they played. He was no older than 12 or 13, smiling widely back at her. His voice and laughter coaxed her through different rooms, as though they were looking for something or someone. The boy pulled on a sliding door, both of the children stopping in the doorway as a room full of fully armed adults stared back at them. They had interrupted. Ryu, a woman's voice shrieked angrily from the far side of the room. What have I told you about playing in the house? The woman stomped towards them, past the angry-looking soldiers. Her long, dark hair was braided to her knees and was beginning to gray near her forehead. Her green eyes were filled with a burning exasperation. A long jagged scar ran down the right side of her face and neck, beginning from her temple running over her collarbone, caused by injury she had sustained many years before. Naomi made eye contact with a man with kind eyes, but a savage appearance. Abba, Naomi's voice echoed in the memory. Go play outside, the woman hissed, pushing the children out of the room, giving them both a quick, but hard, swat on the head, and slamming the door behind them. The children looked at each other, both in quiet defeat. Their game forgotten. A blur and a change of scene. The boy was older now. He was handsome. He was no older than 17. He gently held Naomi's face in his hands. They were entangled in a mess of sheets, their clothes discarded across the room. The world was quiet. Nothing mattered to them but each other and the bed they were in. Naya, he said blissfully, kissing her softly. She liked the soft kisses best. Another blur and another change of scene. The boy lay silent and unmoving in the grass. His eyes matched the color of the graying sky. His blood stained his clothes and the ground around him. Hot tears fell down Naomi's cheeks, leaving streaks on her dirty face. She screamed his name. Ryu, she cried. Somebody, she yelled, holding him to her chest. Somebody help please. Ryu, she rocked him, but he did not stir. She tried kissing him, but still he didn't wake. She turned her head, hearing someone approaching. Kabuto, please, you have to help him. Suddenly, Kakashi found himself back in the woods again. He never saw who Kabuto was. He wasn't entirely sure what he had just seen. Who's Ryu? Who's Abba? He stared down at the woman kneeling in front of him, her arms bracing herself against the tree, her chest heaving up and down as she sobbed. He remembered he was supposed to be undoing the seal on her back, but when he looked, it faded away without a trace. Kakashi didn't know what he'd done to remove it, but regardless, it was gone. Naomi shuddered then collapsed to the ground. Kakashi went to her side, gently rolling her onto her back. With his Sharingan still uncovered, he noticed a small flame surrounding her heart. It wasn't very strong, but it burned brightly nonetheless. It was what remained of her Kitsunebi. The more he stared at the flame, he felt like he could reach into her chest and take what remained of the fire. Quickly, he shut his eye and covered his Sharingan with his headband. What a foolish thought, he berated himself. Without what little she had left, she would die, she had told him that. Besides, what could he possibly do with it once he had it? He held a finger to her throat, checking her pulse. Suddenly, Naomi gasped dramatically and sat up. She clutched onto Kakashi's arm, pulling him towards her. What did you see? She growled in his ear. He was surprised at her strength and ferocity. See? He asked, perplexed by such a weird question. You saw him, didn't you? She gripped him tighter, actually causing him a bit of pain. What did you see? She demanded. Before he could answer, she threw him away from her, causing him to land heavily on his back. Immediately she was up and running away. Hey! Kakashi yelled, running after her. His head felt slightly dizzy from using his Sharingan, but he pursued her anyway. He felt the scene was somewhat familiar to when he had first encountered her. It was harder to chase her in the dark, but she wasn't trying to keep herself hidden either. He watched her trip, landing roughly on the ground. Kakashi was on her before she could get up again. Naomi tried lifting him off of her, but only managed to get her arms pulled behind her back. He held her hands to her back while sitting on her waist to keep her from running away again. While he struggled to keep both of her wrists together in one hand, he reached back with his other hand to grab handcuffs from a pouch. He cuffed her and kept her arms behind her as she growled and tried to kick at him. You bastard, Naomi cursed, still struggling to get out from beneath his grip, her face rubbing into the dirt. You really want to do this again? Kakashi asked angrily. It didn't work out well for you last time. You remember our deal, don't you? No games. What did you see? She repeated, spitting dirt from her mouth. Fine, he replied, adjusting his grip. I saw a boy with black hair and blue eyes. Ryu, wasn't it? That was his name. Naomi's eyes filled with overwhelming sadness, but the tears didn't fall as they had in her memory. He is long dead, she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. Orochimaru killed him, slaughtered him, she spat angrily. I'm going to kill him, she said. I'm going to get my Kitsunebi back and I am going to burn him alive. Kakashi stared down at her. Her eyes burned intensely with her hatred. He then did something unexpected. He gently held her wrists and unlocked the handcuffs. She looked at him confused as he got off of her and helped her up to a sitting position. Go, he said. She was quiet, carefully wiping the dirt from her mouth. Go, before I change my mind and make you help us anymore. We can take care of the children. Go. She stared at him, unsure if he was serious. Quickly, she grabbed the edge of his mask and pulled it down to reveal his face. Before he could react, she had kissed him hard on the mouth. She released him, smiling at his shocked face. She locked eyes with him, trying to convey her thanks before giving him another quick peck on the cheek and sprinting into the darkness. Kakashi sat staring stupidly after her darkening silhouette as she disappeared into the woods. He blinked and then pulled his mask back over his face. No one had ever pulled it off, much less just to kiss him. He stood and brushed the dirt from his pants. He then realized what he had done. He was going to have to explain to Miro and Guy why Naomi was gone. Damn it, he muttered, turning to walk towards the faint orange glow of the campfire. He slowly approached the fire, feeling a wave of exhaustion pass over him. He stumbled into the light, causing Miro and Guy to stand on guard. Kakashi! Guy exclaimed once he realized who it was, catching him before he could fall. He supported him with his arm over his shoulders, guiding him to a spot to sit down. What happened? Miro asked, kneeling beside him. Undoing that seal must have taken more out of me than I thought, Kakashi replied, leaning back against Guy's leg as he also knelt beside him. You need to rest for a bit, Guy said, handing him a canteen. Here, drink. Kakashi took a few sips then leaned back again. Where's Naime? Miro asked, standing up and looking around. Did she run off? He was obviously angered at this. Kakashi nodded. I let her. She needed to take care of something first. What? Miro and Guy said in unison. Why would you do that? Guy asked. Goddammit, Kakashi. Miro cursed. She played you as what she did. You let her distract you. Kitsunes are exceptionally good at deception. He threw his hands into the air, letting them fall at his sides in exasperation. How are we going to find Orochimaru without her help? I don't expect those kids will be. Now, hold on, Kakashi interrupted, leaning forward off of Guy's leg. We can still find them and still use her help. It just may not be tonight. He took a breath and another quick drink of water. Naime said she wanted to go in alone at first, right? Be a distraction. Are you thinking we should track her path in the morning? Guy inquired. It would be much lighter out if we waited a couple of hours. Morning will be here soon enough. And her trail would still be fresh enough to follow. Kakashi nodded. That's exactly what I was thinking. We track her path, find where she went, which it's highly likely she did go to Orochimaru, then we rescue those kids. Sounds like a reasonable plan to me, Guy agreed. Miro stood with his arms crossed. He sighed and shook his head. You still piss me off, Hatake. We'll leave at first light. Kakashi, Guy, Miro, and Naime stopped for the night shortly after the sun went down. Miro got busy building a small fire while the rest of them set up their own sleeping areas. They worked in silence, each keeping to their own areas until Kakashi started to cook their meal of fish and rice. After portioning everyone with rice and a piece of fish, they said their thanks to Kakashi and began to eat. Guy paused looking between the three of them. Miro and Kakashi were both staring at Naime while they ate, looking slightly impatient. She stayed focused on her food, purposely ignoring both of their stares. So, Guy started, setting down his bowl for a moment to talk and break the growing awkward silence. What is the plan to rescue the children? I need to go in alone, Naime said before anyone else could respond. Miro scoffed. Absolutely not. What makes you think we'll let you do that? Kakashi added. Just at first. She responded quickly. I know the layout best. I've been in and out of there plenty of times. Plus you need someone to distract Orochimaru so you can get those kids out, right? She stared Kakashi down. Let me do it. Kakashi glanced at Miro, catching his eye. You just want to get your Kitsunebi, he accused. Her what? Guy asked, mouth full of rice. Kitsunebi, he repeated. She's a kitsune that's lost her fox fire. That's all she wants back. She doesn't actually care about getting those kids back to their families. Naime slammed her bowl down, immediately standing up. That's not true, she cried, glaring piercingly at Kakashi. I know what he's doing to them. Those kids have. She sat back down, grabbing onto her head and biting back a sob as instantaneous pain stabbed through her head. Are you alright? Guy asked, kneeling beside her. She swatted his hand away. Don't touch me, she growled. Guy backed off, wondering what he did wrong. After a few minutes, the pain was virtually gone from her head. It's not true, she repeated. I do care about getting those kids back to their families. Getting my Kitsunebi back is only a part of it. How noble of you, Miro said mockingly. It's a good plan, I suppose, but you still have a personal goal involved. How do we know you aren't going to run off? She was quiet. I can't answer that. Then you don't go off alone. Kakashi looked her over. She looked defeated, tired even. That pain you get, is there a seal somewhere that prevents you from talking about certain things? She eventually nodded. Where is it? He asked. Maybe I can help with it. Slowly, she stood, moving her hair to one side and crossing her arms, reaching for the bottom of her shirt. She turned her back to them as she lifted it to reveal a black, beetle-like seal in the middle of her spine. It was no bigger than Kakashi's palm. I don't think there's much you can do with it, she said with a small voice. Orochimaru made it himself. Why a beetle? Asked Guy. Wouldn't it be more appropriate for it to be a snake? Ya no. Naomi shot him a look. A beetle crawls under the skin and can kill you from the inside. Something he's tried to do with me many times, she mumbled quietly. Guy looked down. Kakashi stood and made his way to her. She stood still as he examined the seal in the firelight. Do you mind? He asked. She nodded, giving him permission. He felt her stiffen at his touch, goosebumps crawling across her back. It was like a tattoo, a permanent part of her skin. I think I can at least release a part of it, if not the whole thing, he said after a while. It'll help loosen your tongue, for lack of a better term. He turned back to Miro. If we want to know anything in much detail, I have to at least try. Miro glanced to Guy. Naomi had let her shirt fall back down, turning back to face the fire. He sighed heavily. It's not like we have much of a choice. But first, could you draw us a map of Orochimaru's lair? In case you do run off, I would like to know where we could at least try to find a way in. She thought for a moment. I'll do it in exchange for a weapon. My sword was confiscated. Before Miro could answer, Kakashi was already reaching into his pouch, pulling out a kunai blade. It's all you get, he stated firmly, putting it into her outstretched hand. It's no sword, but you can at the very least defend yourself with it. Thank you, she said, smugly looking at Miro, pocketing the kunai. Miro shot his partner a glare. She moved past Guy to where Miro had pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. It took her several minutes to draw it, taking pauses to recollect her memory. There are some rooms I've never been in, so not everything is going to be on this map. The only route I would concern myself with is this one, she advised, pointing to an entrance on the side. From here, move quickly along this hall to here. I'm pretty sure that's where he's been keeping the kids when he wasn't working on them. Miro nodded thoughtfully, taking a closer look at what she had drawn. We'll find them no matter what obstacles get in our way, Guy said enthusiastically. Kakashi tapped her shoulder. Come on, let's take care of that seal. You two, he said, pointing to Guy and Miro, come up with a plan of action and we'll discuss it as a group when we get back. We won't be far. The pair walked away from the warmth of the fire, feeling it get noticeably cooler as they moved further into the darkness. Kakashi needed a quiet place away from distractions to concentrate on undoing this foreign seal. Finally, they came into a small clearing. They could still see the orange glow from their campsite, but it was far enough they would have privacy to do what needed to be done. Naomi stopped. You don't have to do this, she said, hugging her arms close to her body. Kakashi sighed. It's probably better for you when it's gone anyway. She shook her head. How do you know this will work? I don't, he said bluntly. He lifted his headband, keeping his Sharingan eye closed still. Turn around, he ordered. Slowly Naomi did as she was told, moving her hair off her back. She then lifted her shirt again, revealing the black beetle. She felt vulnerable with her bare back turned to him, though she didn't sense that he wanted to hurt her on purpose. He opened his Sharingan, observing her chakra signals around the seal. After several long minutes, he was finally able to see the puzzle of the seal itself. It was genius, really. With the Sharingan, he was able to see the beetle was quite literally attached to her spine, sending signals up to her brain. It was more than just a black mark on her skin. He would have to somehow sever the signals her brain was receiving and then remove the beetle one part at a time. He wasn't sure how this may hurt her or whether or not she would survive the removal, but he had to try. All right, Naomi, brace yourself. She braced herself against a tree, while Kakashi made his hands into multiple symbols before placing them on the beetle. The seal glowed pink while he slowly unraveled it, unsealing it from her body first. She cried out, wanting to jump away from him because of the pain, but knew it was too late for him to stop. She gripped tightly to the tree bark, feeling it scratch and tear the skin of her hands. Several tense minutes passed before he could try to unseal it from her mind. Suddenly he was no longer in the woods with her. He saw a boy with jet black hair and eyes as blue as the sky, pulling her by the arm through a house as they played. He was no older than 12 or 13, smiling widely back at her. His voice and laughter coaxed her through different rooms, as though they were looking for something or someone. The boy pulled on a sliding door, both of the children stopping in the doorway as a room full of fully armed adults stared back at them. They had interrupted. Ryu. A woman's voice shrieked angrily from the far side of the room. What have I told you about playing in the house? The woman stomped towards them, past the angry-looking soldiers. Her long, dark hair was braided to her knees and was beginning to gray near her forehead. Her green eyes were filled with a burning exasperation. A long jagged scar ran down the right side of her face and neck, beginning from her temple running over her collarbone, caused by injury she had sustained many years before. Naomi made eye contact with a man with kind eyes, but a savage appearance. Abba, Naomi's voice echoed in the memory. Go play outside, the woman hissed, pushing the children out of the room, giving them both a quick, but hard, swat on the head, and slamming the door behind them. The children looked at each other, both in quiet defeat. Their game forgotten. A blur and a change of scene. The boy was older now. He was handsome. He was no older than 17. He gently held Naomi's face in his hands. They were entangled in a mess of sheets, their clothes discarded across the room. The world was quiet. Nothing mattered to them but each other and the bed they were in. Naya, he said blissfully, kissing her softly, she liked the soft kisses best. Another blur and another change of scene. The boy lay silent and unmoving in the grass. His eyes matched the color of the graying sky. His blood stained his clothes and the ground around him. Hot tears fell down Naomi's cheeks, leaving streaks on her dirty face. She screamed his name. Ryu, she cried. Somebody, she yelled, holding him to her chest. Somebody help please. Ryu, she rocked him, but he did not stir. She tried kissing him, but still he didn't wake. She turned her head, hearing someone approaching. Kabuto, please, you have to help him. Suddenly, Kakashi found himself back in the woods again. He never saw who Kabuto was. He wasn't entirely sure what he had just seen. Who's Ryu? Who's Abba? He stared down at the woman kneeling in front of him, her arms bracing herself against the tree, her chest heaving up and down as she sobbed. He remembered he was supposed to be undoing the seal on her back, but when he looked, it faded away without a trace. Kakashi didn't know what he'd done to remove it, but regardless, it was gone. Naomi shuddered then collapsed to the ground. Kakashi went to her side, gently rolling her onto her back. With his Sharingan still uncovered, he noticed a small flame surrounding her heart. It wasn't very strong, but it burned brightly nonetheless. It was what remained of her Kitsunebi. The more he stared at the flame, he felt like he could reach into her chest and take what remained of the fire. Quickly, he shut his eye and covered his Sharingan with his headband. What a foolish thought, he berated himself. Without what little she had left, she would die, she had told him that. Besides, what could he possibly do with it once he had it? He held a finger to her throat, checking her pulse. Suddenly, Naomi gasped dramatically and sat up. She clutched onto Kakashi's arm pulling him towards her. What did you see? She growled in his ear. He was surprised at her strength and ferocity. See? He asked, perplexed by such a weird question. You saw him, didn't you? She gripped him tighter, actually causing him a bit of pain. What did you see? She demanded. Before he could answer, she threw him away from her, causing him to land heavily on his back. Immediately she was up and running away. Hey! Kakashi yelled, running after her. His head felt slightly dizzy from using his Sharingan, but he pursued her anyway. He felt the scene was somewhat familiar to when he had first encountered her. It was harder to chase her in the dark, but she wasn't trying to keep herself hidden either. He watched her trip, landing roughly on the ground. Kakashi was on her before she could get up again. Naomi tried lifting him off of her, but only managed to get her arms pulled behind her back. He held her hands to her back while sitting on her waist to keep her from running away again. While he struggled to keep both of her wrists together in one hand, he reached back with his other hand to grab handcuffs from a pouch. He cuffed her and kept her arms behind her as she growled and tried to kick at him. You bastard, Naomi cursed, still struggling to get out from beneath his grip, her face rubbing into the dirt. You really want to do this again? Kakashi asked angrily. It didn't work out well for you last time. You remember our deal, don't you? No games. What did you see? She repeated, spitting dirt from her mouth. Fine, he replied, adjusting his grip. I saw a boy with black hair and blue eyes. Ryu, wasn't it? That was his name. Naime's eyes filled with overwhelming sadness, but the tears didn't fall as they had in her memory. He is long dead, she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. Orochimaru killed him, slaughtered him, she spat angrily. I'm going to kill him, she said. I'm going to get my Kitsunebi back and I am going to burn him alive. Kakashi stared down at her. Her eyes burned intensely with her hatred. He then did something unexpected. He gently held her wrists and unlocked the handcuffs. She looked at him confused as he got off of her and helped her up to a sitting position. Go, he said. She was quiet, carefully wiping the dirt from her mouth. Go, before I change my mind and make you help us anymore. We can take care of the children. Go. She stared at him, unsure if he was serious. Quickly, she grabbed the edge of his mask and pulled it down to reveal his face. Before he could react, she had kissed him hard on the mouth. She released him, smiling at his shocked face. She locked eyes with him, trying to convey her thanks before giving him another quick peck on the cheek and sprinting into the darkness. Kakashi sat staring stupidly after her darkening silhouette as she disappeared into the woods. He blinked and then pulled his mask back over his face. No one had ever pulled it off, much less just to kiss him. He stood and brushed the dirt from his pants. He then realized what he had done. He was going to have to explain to Miro and Guy why Naime was gone. Damn it, he muttered, turning to walk towards the faint orange glow of the campfire. He slowly approached the fire, feeling a wave of exhaustion pass over him. He stumbled into the light, causing Miro and Guy to stand on guard. Kakashi! Guy exclaimed once he realized who it was, catching him before he could fall. He supported him with his arm over his shoulders, guiding him to a spot to sit down. What happened? Miro asked, kneeling beside him. Undoing that seal must have taken more out of me than I thought, Kakashi replied, leaning back against Guy's leg as he also knelt beside him. You need to rest for a bit, Guy said, handing him a canteen. Here, drink. Kakashi took a few sips then leaned back again. Where's Naime? Miro asked, standing up and looking around. Did she run off? He was obviously angered at this. Kakashi nodded. I let her. She needed to take care of something first. What? Miro and Guy said in unison. Why would you do that? Guy asked. Goddammit, Kakashi. Miro cursed. She played you as what she did. You let her distract you. Kitsunes are exceptionally good at deception. He threw his hands into the air, letting them fall at his sides in exasperation. How are we going to find Orochimaru without her help? I don't expect those kids will be. Now, hold on, Kakashi interrupted, leaning forward off of Guy's leg. We can still find them and still use her help. It just may not be tonight. He took a breath and another quick drink of water. Naime said she wanted to go in alone at first, right? Be a distraction. Are you thinking we should track her path in the morning? Guy inquired. It would be much lighter out if we waited a couple of hours. Morning will be here soon enough. And her trail would still be fresh enough to follow. Kakashi nodded. That's exactly what I was thinking. We track her path, find where she went, which it's highly likely she did go to Orochimaru, then we rescue those kids. Sounds like a reasonable plan to me, Guy agreed. Miro stood with his arms crossed. He sighed and shook his head. You still piss me off, Hitaki. We'll leave at first light.